Studying often becomes emotionally charged because of early experiences linked to pressure, criticism, or failure. When learning is consistently associated with anxiety, punishment, or unrealistic expectations, the brain begins to connect studying with discomfort rather than curiosity. Over time, this emotional conditioning creates a deep resistance that feels instinctive rather than rational. Many people who hate studying carry unresolved academic shame from childhood or adolescence. Being compared to others, labeled as lazy, or repeatedly told they were not smart enough can leave lasting psychological scars. These memories resurface whenever studying is attempted, triggering avoidance as a form of emotional self-protection. Negative classroom environments also play a major role in shaping attitudes toward studying. Teachers who prioritize grades over understanding or discipline over encouragement may unintentionally create fear-based learning. In such environments, studying becomes about survival rather than growth, leading many to disengage completely. Another emotional factor is the fear of failure. For some individuals, not studying feels safer than trying and possibly failing. Avoidance becomes a way to preserve self-esteem, because effort followed by failure can feel far more painful than failure caused by lack of effort. Studying can also awaken feelings of inadequacy when people compare themselves to peers who appear to learn effortlessly. This comparison creates the illusion that intelligence is fixed, making effort seem pointless. Over time, resentment toward studying grows because it constantly highlights perceived personal shortcomings. Stress and emotional overload further intensify hatred toward studying. When life is filled with responsibilities, financial worries, or family pressure, studying feels like an additional burden rather than an opportunity. The mind naturally resists activities that increase emotional strain. Some individuals associate studying with loss of freedom and autonomy. When learning is imposed rather than chosen, it can feel like a form of control. This perception creates rebellion, where hatred towards studying is actually a reaction against feeling powerless. Emotional exhaustion also contributes significantly. People who are already mentally drained struggle to engage with tasks that require sustained focus. Studying demands patience and concentration, which feel impossible when emotional resources are depleted. In many cases, hatred towards studying is not about learning itself but about unresolved emotional wounds connected to the learning process. Without addressing these emotions, attempts to change study habits often fail because the root cause remains untouched. Understanding the emotional origins of this hatred allows individuals to separate learning from past pain. When emotions are acknowledged and reframed, studying can slowly transform from a source of distress into a neutral or even positive experience. People who hate studying often develop unhelpful cognitive patterns that sabotage motivation. One common pattern is all-or-nothing thinking, where studying is seen as either perfect or worthless. This mindset makes any small effort feel meaningless, discouraging consistency. Another cognitive barrier is the belief that studying should always feel productive or enjoyable. When learning feels difficult or confusing, individuals may interpret this discomfort as proof that studying is ineffective. In reality, struggle is a natural part of cognitive growth. Low intrinsic motivation is also a significant factor. When people do not see personal meaning in what they are studying, their brains resist engagement. Learning feels empty when it lacks relevance to personal goals, values, or interests. Some individuals internalize the belief that intelligence is innate rather than developed. This fixed mindset leads them to view studying as pointless effort rather than a tool for improvement. If success is believed to depend on natural ability, studying feels like an exhausting performance with little reward. Attention difficulties can further reinforce hatred towards studying. When focus is inconsistent, studying takes more time and energy than expected. This creates frustration and reinforces the belief that studying is an unpleasant and inefficient activity. Procrastination often emerges as a coping mechanism rather than laziness. Delaying study reduces immediate discomfort, even though it increases long-term stress. Over time, this cycle strengthens negative beliefs about studying and personal discipline. The modern environment also shapes cognitive resistance. Constant exposure to fast-paced digital content reduces tolerance for slow, effortful tasks. Studying, which requires deep focus, feels unbearable compared to instant stimulation. Self-talk plays a powerful role in shaping motivation. Repeated thoughts such as feeling incapable, bored, or overwhelmed become internal narratives that define one's relationship with studying. These thoughts feel factual even when they are learned patterns. When studying is framed as an obligation rather than a choice, motivation declines sharply. The brain responds more positively to autonomy, and forced learning often triggers resistance rather than engagement. By reshaping cognitive patterns and redefining the purpose of studying, individuals can weaken their aversion. When studying becomes a tool for personal growth rather than a measure of worth, motivation gradually becomes more sustainable. Hatred toward studying is often reinforced by daily habits and surroundings. Disorganized environments increase cognitive load, making it harder to concentrate and easier to feel overwhelmed. When studying feels chaotic, avoidance becomes a natural response. Lack of routine also contributes to negative attitudes. Without consistent study habits, learning feels unpredictable and mentally demanding. The brain prefers patterns, and irregular studying increases resistance each time the task is attempted. Sleep deprivation and poor physical health significantly reduce cognitive capacity. When the body is exhausted, studying feels disproportionately difficult. Over time, individuals associate studying with fatigue and discomfort rather than mental clarity. The absence of immediate rewards can also discourage effort. Studying often provides delayed benefits, while distractions offer instant gratification. This imbalance trains the brain to prefer short-term pleasure over long-term growth. Social influences shape behavior as well. Being surrounded by peers who dismiss studying can normalize avoidance and reinforce negative attitudes. In contrast, environments that value learning subtly encourage engagement without pressure. Perfectionism can turn studying into an unbearable task. When individuals feel they must understand everything completely, starting becomes intimidating. This leads to avoidance and reinforces hatred toward the process. Multitasking habits further reduce study effectiveness. Constantly switching between tasks fragments attention and increases frustration. Studying feels longer and more exhausting, strengthening negative associations. Poor study strategies also play a role. Ineffective methods make studying inefficient, which reinforces the belief that it is a waste of time. Without guidance, many people blame themselves rather than the strategy. Behavioral avoidance gradually becomes a habit. Each time studying is avoided, temporary relief is experienced, reinforcing the behavior. Over time, this habit becomes automatic and emotionally charged. Changing the environment and small daily behaviors can slowly transform one's relationship with studying. When studying becomes manageable, structured, and aligned with personal well-being, hatred often gives way to tolerance and eventually acceptance. For many people, hatred toward studying is deeply connected to identity. Over time, individuals may begin to define themselves as someone who is not academic or not made for studying. This identity becomes emotionally protective, because rejecting studying feels easier than confronting the possibility of struggling within it. Once studying conflicts with self-image, resistance becomes automatic. Social labeling strongly reinforces this identity. Being categorized early in life as bad at school, distracted, or uninterested in learning can shape how a person sees themselves for years. Even when circumstances change, the internalized label remains, making studying feel like a threat to a familiar sense of self. Some people associate studying with social isolation. Long hours alone with books or screens may feel disconnected from relationships and belonging. When social validation is more accessible through interaction rather than effortful learning, studying can feel emotionally empty or even lonely. Cultural narratives also influence attitudes toward studying. In some environments, academic effort is portrayed as boring, uncool, or unnecessary for success. When achievement is linked to talent, charisma, or luck instead of learning, studying loses social value and becomes easy to dismiss. Self-worth is another critical factor. Many individuals unconsciously link academic performance to personal value. When studying becomes a test of worth rather than a skill-building process, avoidance becomes a way to protect emotional stability. Hating studying then functions as a defense mechanism. Fear of being seen trying and failing plays a powerful role. Effort makes vulnerability visible while avoidance hides it. Some people prefer to reject studying entirely rather than risk exposing limitations in front of others or themselves. Studying can also challenge deeply held beliefs about control. Learning requires patience, delayed gratification, and acceptance of uncertainty. For individuals who value immediate competence or control, this process can feel uncomfortable and threatening, leading to rejection of studying as a whole. Social comparison intensifies this reaction. Seeing others succeed academically may create a sense of inferiority that turns into resentment. Rather than confronting this discomfort, the mind reframes studying as pointless or oppressive, reducing emotional pain. Over time, repeated avoidance reshapes identity further. The longer someone distances themselves from studying, the more foreign and intimidating it feels. This reinforces the belief that studying belongs to other people, not to them. When studying is redefined as a flexible tool rather than a defining trait, identity-based resistance begins to soften. Separating self-worth from performance allows learning to become an act of growth instead of a threat, making space for a healthier relationship with studying. Hatred toward studying is often rooted in issues of control and autonomy. For many people, studying has been something imposed rather than chosen, tied to rules, deadlines, and external expectations. When learning is experienced as an obligation, the mind naturally resists it as a way to reclaim personal freedom. Early educational systems frequently emphasize obedience over curiosity. When students are told what to study, how to study, and when to study, they may never develop a sense of ownership over learning. As a result, studying becomes associated with submission rather than empowerment, creating long-term psychological resistance. Authority figures play a significant role in this dynamic. Teachers, parents, or institutions that use fear, punishment, or shame as motivation can unintentionally turn studying into a symbol of control. Over time, rejecting studying becomes a quiet form of rebellion against authority rather than a rejection of knowledge itself. Some individuals develop a strong internal need for autonomy. For them, being told what to do triggers emotional discomfort and defiance. Studying, when framed as mandatory, activates this resistance even if the subject itself is interesting or useful. This reaction is often unconscious. People may believe they hate studying because it is boring or difficult, when in reality they hate how it makes them feel powerless. The mind protects autonomy by rejecting anything that threatens it, even when that thing could be beneficial. Rigid educational structures can intensify this response. Fixed schedules, standardized testing, and narrow definitions of success leave little room for personal expression. Studying then feels mechanical and disconnected from individuality, making disengagement emotionally appealing. In some cases, hatred toward studying is linked to past experiences of being controlled beyond school. Individuals who grew up in restrictive or authoritarian environments may be especially sensitive to perceived pressure. Studying can trigger broader emotional memories tied to lack of choice and self-determination. The absence of voice also matters. When learners feel their interests, questions, or learning styles are ignored, studying becomes alienating. The process feels like something done to them rather than something done for themselves. As adults, this resistance often persists even when external pressure is gone. The body and mind remember studying as a loss of control, so avoidance continues automatically. This explains why some people still hate studying even when they freely choose their path. Reframing studying as an act of self-direction can transform this relationship. When individuals choose what, how, and why they learn, studying shifts from obedience to agency. In this context, resistance fades, and learning becomes an expression of autonomy rather than a threat to it.